Didžiausi apleisti megaprojektai pasaulyje. Čia bus angliškas video, bet šitas turės būti visai įdomu.
From an abandoned Japanese island that is hiding a dark and very troubled history behind its crumbling walls, to a towering abandoned skyscraper in Venezuela that was once inhabited by around
Mes Kaune irgi turim apleistą vieną.
In this video, we'll take a look at the biggest abandoned megaprojects in the world. We start with the Wonderland amusement park. Located just a mere 20-minute drive away from the Chinese capital of Beijing, Wonderland Amusement Park was supposed to be the largest amusement park in Asia. Plans for it were drafted in the early 90s. The park would cover a total area of 50 hectares on an undeveloped cornfield. By comparison, it would have been about the same size as the famous Tokyo Disneyland in Japan. Chinese property developer Rainwood Group hoped for Wonderland to become the company's flagship project, and for the property to draw millions of visitors from the nearby megacity.
The
amusement park began in the 90s. The plan for the site was to create a Disneyland-style theme park with the iconic castle centerpiece and medieval-themed buildings and walls surrounding it. Unfortunately, in 1998, halfway through Wonderland's construction, all work on the site was suddenly stopped and the park was left abandoned. Locals started to bring up theories as to why the massive project was suddenly put to a complete halt. Some stories suggested that the park's location was cursed. Some rumors, a mass grave was unearthed during the construction. But despite all these rumors and hearsay, the truth was far more plain and simple. After financial disagreements with the local government and farmers who had been working on the area before the construction began, the entire project was put to a complete stop. The developers were not able to come to a consensus with the locals over property prices, and they unfortunately had to abandon the project as negotiations were stuck. The project would have uprooted the livelihood of farmers and their families, and they weren't willing to just give up their only source of income. As Rainwood and all their workers hurriedly left the site, the half-built attractions in the property simply crumbled, and nature slowly took over. Over the years, as the location was abandoned, the local farmers simply reclaimed the land and resumed working and cultivating plants amidst the backdrop of a derelict medieval fantasy. An attempt to revive the project was initiated by the developers in 2008, but it ultimately failed once again, as the build structures were already too crumbled and worn down beyond repair. 5 years later, the surrounding structures were eventually demolished, putting an end to any hope for the project to be completed. Number 4, the Memphis Pyramid. Since the city of Memphis, Tennessee is named after the historic city of Memphis in Egypt, Mark Hartz came up with an ambitious project for his hometown meant to mimic its ancient namesake. His original plan was to create 3 pyramids that would all be situated along the Mississippi River, mirroring the famous Giza Pyramid complex. These 3 structures would be built at a scale 2/3 of the original size and resemble the exact same positions of its Egyptian counterparts. The project was conceived in hopes of creating a name for the city of Memphis by creating a landmark that would represent the city to the rest of the world, similar in vein to St. Louis Gateway Arch or Paris Eiffel Tower. However, this ambitious plan didn't come to fruition until Mark Hartz's son John Hartz revived the idea in the 1980s. The new proposal scrapped the 3-pyramid complex in exchange for one main pyramid that would stand 98 meters tall and have a base of 180 meters, making it one of the biggest pyramids in the entire world.
Kokia prasmė, kokia prasmė dabar moderninė piramidė? Tai nėra kažkoks pasiekimas, ir net nėra tokia didžiulė, ten pastatai didesni net yra, kokia prasmė būtų tokios piramidės, ten tos piramidės, jos yra amazing, nes jas pastatė ten belenkaip senai ir jos ten iš lentų, čia dabar pasitelkus naują technologiją pastatyti piramidę nėra sunku, kažkaip čia nežinau, atrodo biškai toks dumb projektas.
Would ultimately become the Memphis Pyramid began in September 1989, but even before the building finished construction and opened its doors 2 years later, the Memphis Pyramid already had many different problems. Many of the planned amenities to be built in the building were ultimately scrapped because of financial difficulties. These included a music museum, a radio station, an observation deck, an outdoor theme park, and a Hard Rock cafe. So when the
Aš buvau Hard Rock cafe Švedijoje, kai buvau.
Observation deck and
kai tame Gotenburge buvau. Jo, ten buvo Hard Rock cafe pirmą vakarą, ten buvo. Aš yra šūdas buvo. Nu, nebuvo šūdas, bet ten kiti geresnės tos kavinės ir bariukai buvo, kur buvom kitom dienom negu tas pirmas, nes jis labai mainstreaminis ir didelis ir tenai kažkaip netoks vaibas.
Cafe. So when the Memphis Pyramid opened in 1991, it served as a basketball arena, and the opening was a huge success. The entire building was filled with more than 21,000 visitors. However, on this all-important day for the pyramid, the toilets inside of the arena backed up and flooded the basement, as the city's sewer transfer system failed to keep up with such a number of people. Over the next few years, the Memphis Pyramid would be used for many different purposes and events, such as basketball
tournaments, concerts, and
even a boxing match between Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson that became the highest-grossing boxing event in history at the time. Although the Memphis Pyramid was turning a profit with many different events it was hosting, it didn't have a permanent tenant that would ensure its long-term profitability. So in 2001, the city of Memphis attempted to relocate an NBA team into the city, with the Memphis Pyramid serving as their home arena. The city spent an estimated $7 million to retrofit the facility to become a suitable venue for the Memphis Grizzlies. But after the Memphis Pyramid served as the Grizzlies' home for a total of only 3 years, they left to move to the newer and more modern FedEx Forum, which opened in 2004. And because of the city's contract with the Grizzlies, the pyramid could only ever be used with the team's approval, leaving it mostly abandoned over the next decade.
Oh, wow.
A committee was even created in order to explore possible long-term future uses for the abandoned.
Čia iš tikrųjų tai biškai šudnai, nes jie jau darė ir viskas veikia, bet va tada davė tipo komandą ir tada tik tos komandos, sutikimų gali naudoti. Čia toks netyčia, ne tik netyčia, toks, kažkoks unlucky, kaip sakant.
Some considerations that were brought up were to convert the pyramid into an indoor theme park, a casino, or a shopping mall. However, none of these ideas ever came to fruition. The original idea for the pyramid had failed, and it remained empty. But despite being left vacant for a very long time, there was hope for the Memphis Pyramid. American retailer Bass Pro Shops came into an agreement with the city of Memphis for a 55-year lease of the pyramid to convert it into one giant store. So today, the Memphis Pyramid is home to the largest Bass Pro Shop in the entire world, along with an archery and shooting range and even a laser arcade. Ever since the big change, the pyramid's new tenant has found huge success in the location, with 3 million people visiting in its first year. Number 3. Hashima Island. 15 kilometers southwest of the city of Nagasaki in Japan lies a small island just a measly 500 meters across at its longest point. Hashima Island, seemingly stuck in time, is home to dozens of concrete buildings, seawalls, and ruins built at the turn of the 20th century. Almost perfectly preserved by its isolation, Hashima Island is a symbol of Japan's rapid industrialization and its dark history hidden behind the walls of this abandoned site. Hashima was first inhabited back in 1887, when a substantial amount of undersea coal was discovered in the area. Mitsubishi then bought the island and started construction of a coal mining facility along with seawalls that surrounded the entire island and protected it from typhoons. By 1916, the company started to construct many different amenities for the growing number of workers living on the island. They built a 7-floor apartment building, a school, a hospital, a community center, and even entertainment facilities, such as a cinema, a swimming pool, and many different shops. In 1959, the island reached its peak population of 5,300 people living in this tiny plot of land. However, by the turn of the late 1960s, petroleum quickly replaced coal as Japan's main source of energy. Many coal mines across the country were forced to shut down because of this, and Hashima's coal facility, along with its population, started to dwindle down. After most of the residents left, Mitsubishi officially ceased operations as the island was slowly left abandoned. The island continued to exist as a coal town for the next 30 years, but without a single person permanently inhabiting the place. Its industrial-era buildings...
Wow, čia fascinating yra, ne? Tai visa sala 500 metrų, čia gan maža sala, tipo, apeit gali labai greitai, vienas mikrorajonas, I guess, toks, net nežinau, dar mažesnis. Bet, tipo, kiek įdomu atsipirko jiems iš tikro. Ten kažkiek vis tiek to kaulo mainino, bet plečia tiek, kiek pastatyti reikėjo ir nupirkti, jaučiu net neatsipirko. Bet, ir tada ką, tiesiog palieki. Gamta pasiema. Wow. O, tokie tai fascinating man.
Started to slowly crumble as nature reclaimed the island. By 2002, Mitsubishi relinquished ownership of the island.
Ten gal kokį filmą yra filmavę, nes ten būtų neįtikėtinai kokiam ten zombio apokalipsijai filmuoti, ne lokacija. Jau po zombio apokalipsės.
And transferred it to the town of Takashima, and then eventually to the city of Nagasaki. Hashima Island soon became the subject of curious explorers looking to uncover the history of the island and...
Žinai, gal plėtė kaip investicija su tikėjimusi, kad čia, žinai, per ateinančius ten 10 metų mums labai pelno atneš, bet tada po 2 metų pasikeičia tas, jie pradėjo tą petroliumą naudoti ir tipo, klausimas, kiek tas kaulas ten jiem pelningas buvo, nes visą jie ten aptverti to, konstrukciją tą ir pastatus pastatyti, čia kainavo, aišku, I don't know. Tipo viską statė ir galbūt buvo tokia kaip investicija. Bet aišku, ne vienintelė investicija Mitsubishi, ten, tipo, kur darė taigas, kai kurios gali neatsipirkti jiems pohui, bus galų gale.
Abandoned buildings. So in 2005, access to the island was reopened by the city of Nagasaki for journalists. Just a few years later, the island also became accessible to the general public and now serves as a popular tourist destination.
Jo, turistum vieta čia neblogai.
The started a bid to include Hashima Island as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, citing the importance of the historical ruins and well-preserved architecture on the island. However, this move was quickly opposed by both the North and South Korean governments because of the island's dark history that Japan purposely left out in the UNESCO application. Unbeknownst to most people, from the 1930s up to the end of the Second World War, Hashima Island became the site of countless acts of human rights violations, wherein Korean and Chinese prisoners of war were forced to work under extremely harsh conditions. Of 130 up to 1,300 forced laborers reportedly lost their lives on the island because of exhaustion, malnutrition, and poor working conditions. Despite Korea's opposition to the UNESCO bid, Hashima Island is now considered as a World Heritage Site and is visited by thousands of tourists each year.
Okay, čia toks įdomesnis.
2. Berlin Templehof Airport. As one of the first airports in the German capital, Berlin Templehof is a site that has witnessed and lived through many of the country's most historic moments. Officially designated as an airport in 1923, Berlin Templehof served as the main and only air traffic hub in the area. During the late 1930s, Berlin Templehof quickly became one of the busiest airports in the world, thanks to its proximity to the German capital. Following the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of Germany in 1989, Berlin Templehof soon became one of 3 different airports all serving one city that used to be divided. Over the next few years, Berlin Templehof continued to function as a regular commercial airport until in 1996. A resolution from the city government of Berlin was announced that would ultimately lead to the airport's closing. Unlike the other projects in this video, Berlin Templehof actually served its intended purpose and was only ever abandoned because of its age, as a means of concentrating all domestic and international air traffic in the city to a single central airport. Templehof and the neighboring Tegel Airport were planned to be closed down and replaced by the new Berlin brand. Many Berliners refused the decision, and a referendum was even held to keep the airport open. The referendum failed, and the last commercial flight from Berlin Templehof took off on the 30th of October 2008. After that, the city of Berlin announced that they would transform the old airport into a city park with a budget.
O šiaip mes Lietuvoje turim kažką apleisti, Kaune tas pastatas buvo, tas vaiduoklis apleistas, buvo ir keletas ten, bet vienas nugriautas jau, viskas, normaliai. Perstatytas, dabar mes vieną tą turim Kaune, jo Vilniuje yra kas nors, ten senas pastatas apleistas, kur nenugriauna ilgą laiką, aš nežinau Vilniuje.
Of 60 million euro in an event attended by thousands of
the so-called
Templehof event opened and is now the world's largest inner city open space with a total area of 380 hectares. Famous Central Park in New York City. Some of the site's history can still be seen today, such as parts of the old terminal along with hangars and even the runway can still be recognized.
Gal ne tik, kad dar gali būti nugriauti ir apleisti tipo, kur tiesiog nenaudojami ir apleisti ir laukia sprendimo kažkokio ir panašiai čia iš tos pusės.
Even after the change. Today, the old airport also serves as a location for different events, such as music festivals and fairs. And finally, the Torre de David, also called Venezuela's squatter skyscraper. At a height of 170 meters and a total of 45 floors, the Torre de David in Venezuela's capital city of Caracas is the country's 3rd tallest skyscraper. Construction began in 1990 and was supposed to be a mixed use of residential and office space located in the middle of the highly urbanized capital. However, just 4 years after work on the skyscraper began, construction was abruptly stopped because of the Venezuelan banking crisis.
Oh,
the government
crazy.
immediately took control of the tower in its incomplete state. The building lacked any of the most basic utilities and services necessary for a building like the Torre de David to function. It didn't have any electricity, running water, windows, and in some areas, the walls weren't even complete. In 2001, the government of Venezuela even attempted to auction off the building, along with the other structures in the complex, but nobody was interested in purchasing the rundown and incomplete building. At the same time as all of this was happening, the entire city of Caracas was suffering from a housing shortage.
Which is very fascinating.
Thousands of people without a home. Because of this, the citizens of Caracas soon made their way into the buildings inside the complex and occupied them. Seeing as the towering skyscraper had been left abandoned for more than a decade now, the complex was occupied by as many as 200 homeless families looking for a place to call their own. By some estimates, about 40% of the entire city's homeless population were living inside of the tower.
Va kaip reikia Amerikai išspręsti Kalifornijai tą benamių problemą. Pastatyti dangoraižį ir apleisti. Ten visi suvaryti vietoj palapinių ir viskas. Problem solved.
The tower's residents soon began to create their own utility services, with an improvised aqueduct system even serving residents up to the 22nd floor with running water. Motorcycles were even used to taxi residents and visitors between the first 10 floors through a series of winding paths and ramps. By the year 2011, the population of the Torre de David grew to as much as 2,500 people and even peaked at one point at around 5,000 individuals. In 2014, after careful planning and discussion with the tower's residents, the Venezuelan government launched a new program that would relocate the hundreds of families from the Torre de David into new government-provided homes in a new city south of the capital. As of 2015, it has been reported that all residents of the building had successfully been relocated to their new homes in Cuba. There had been many talks on what the possible future of the Torre de David would be. Some proposed to demolish the tower altogether, while some are pushing for the creation of affordable housing within the complex. As recently as 2018, the building even suffered from significant damage from an earthquake, which partially collapsed the top 5 floors of the tower. So, until today, the tower remains incomplete and abandoned while serving as a temporary center for emergency care. What do you think about these abandoned megaprojects?
What do I think? It's pretty cool, but we are done šiandienai. Koks vakaras ilgas, kaip širdim man kelia. Nuskink man jazminą.